The storm rolled across the Arizona plains like a beast unchained. The sky had turned black as coal, and the wind screamed through the canyon ridges, sweeping dust and memory alike into the air. Clara Monroe pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her fingers stiff from the cold, her breath a white ghost in the night. She'd been on the trail since morning, trying to reach the next town before sundown, but the storm had other plans. Her horse, a chestnut mare named Daisy, had stumbled on the slick rock, throwing her to the ground before bolting into the darkness. Now she was alone in a land where being lost could mean death. Lightning tore across the sky, and for a moment she saw the canyon walls glint like silver teeth. Then came the thunder, shaking the very bones of the earth. She pressed onward, boots sliding on the wet stone, eyes scanning for any sign of shelter. But the desert did not offer kindness to strangers. When she finally saw smoke, thin, ghostly tendrils rising from beyond the next ridge, she thought it might be a trick of her weary eyes. Still, she followed. Her feet ached, her heart pounded, but the promise of warmth drew her on. The fire was small, burning low beside a cluster of rocks that shielded it from the rain, and beside it, crouched like a shadow carved from the earth itself, was a man. He turned his head before she could speak, and she froze. The firelight caught his face, high cheekbones, a scar that ran along his jaw, eyes black and still as river stones. He was Apache. Every tale she'd ever heard about his kind came rushing back, tales whispered in saloons and around ranch tables, of raids and scalps and vengeance. But none of those stories prepared her for the quiet strength in those eyes. He didn't move for a long moment. Then he stood, slow and deliberate, like a mountain rising. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, heavy with the weight of an older world. "This is no place for a white woman alone." Clara swallowed hard, rain dripping from her hair. "My horse ran off. I've nowhere to go." He studied her, silent as the wind. Then, without a word, he motioned for her to follow. Something in that gesture, a mixture of command and reluctant mercy, made her obey. He led her down a narrow trail, barely visible in the storm. The path wound between towering cliffs, the air thick with the smell of rain-soaked sage. At last they reached a small cabin hidden among the rocks, its roof patched with bark and hides. Smoke curled from its chimney. Inside, it was warm, dimly lit by a single oil lamp. Animal pelts hung along the walls. Clay jars sat neatly on wooden shelves. The place was neither savage nor crude. It was the home of a man who lived close to the land. He motioned her toward the fire. "Sit." She did, trembling slightly. The heat burned her cheeks, but she didn't care. He moved with silent precision, pouring water from a clay pot into a tin cup and handing it to her. "Drink." She took it with both hands, the warmth seeping into her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. He grunted, then sat opposite her, sharpening a knife with long, slow strokes. The sound filled the cabin, the scrape of steel on stone, steady as a heartbeat. "You have a name?" he asked at last. Clara Monroe." "Talon," he said simply. The storm hammered at the roof, but inside the cabin it was strangely calm. Still, Clara felt something tense in the air, a wildness that didn't come from the storm outside. His presence was heavy, magnetic, like the air before lightning. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. "I live where the land allows," he replied. "The land and the spirits." His English was rough but sure, each word measured. He didn't look at her often, but when he did, his gaze was piercing, as if he saw things she didn't want revealed. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said, setting the cup down. "I'll leave when the storm passes." He looked up then, and for the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes, something like pain. "You will not go tonight," he said firmly. "The storm will take you. You stay here." His voice carried no room for argument. Clara nodded, pulling her shawl closer. Hours passed. The storm raged, then softened like a beast growing tired. Talon spoke little. He fed the fire, his movements deliberate, almost ritual. She found herself studying the lines of his face, the way the firelight caught the curve of his jaw, the quiet strength in his hands. There was power there, but also loneliness. She recognized it because it mirrored her own. At last, he broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come this far alone," he said. "These lands are not safe for you." "I had no choice," she replied. "My husband died last winter. I sold the ranch. I was heading west to start again." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "The West eats the weak," he said. "But you are not weak." The words surprised her. "How would you know?" He gave a faint, almost humorless smile. "You walked through a storm that would break most men." Clara didn't know what to say. His voice had softened and something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile, dangerous. Then, after a long pause, he said in a voice low and rough as gravel, "I can't control myself around you." The words froze her. He said them not like a threat, but like a confession torn from deep inside. His eyes held hers, dark and searching. The knife in his hand stilled. "I don't mean harm," he added, his jaw tight. "But I am a man of the wild. I keep away from settlers for a reason. Your kind brings trouble and memory." Clara's heart pounded. "Then why help me?" He stared into the fire. "Because once someone helped me, before I knew what mercy cost." The flames crackled, throwing shadows across his face. She didn't speak. She felt the storm fading outside, the world narrowing. To the two of them, the fire, the silence, the breath between their words. Finally, she said softly, "Maybe mercy doesn't always cost. Maybe it gives something back." Talon looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and turned away. "Rest," he said. "You'll need your strength by morning." He moved to the corner of the cabin, laying down his blanket on the floor. Clara lay near the hearth, staring into the flames, her thoughts tangled like roots. She should have felt fear. Any woman would. But instead, she felt something else. A strange calm, a pull she couldn't explain. There was danger in him, yes, but also honesty. He didn't pretend. He didn't hide behind soft words or false promises. Out here, among the wild ridges and endless sky, that kind of truth was rare. As the fire burned low, she heard him murmur, something in his own tongue, a prayer maybe, or a warning to the spirits. His voice was low and steady, and for a moment she closed her eyes and listened, feeling the rhythm of his words blend with the rain. When she drifted into sleep, she thought she felt his gaze on her, quiet, watchful, like the night itself. And far outside, beyond the storm's retreating rumble, the canyon whispered. It carried the sound of the wind, of old ghosts, and of something new being born in the wild heart of the West. When Clara woke, the fire had burned down to a faint orange glow. Dawn light crept through the cracks in the cabin walls, painting stripes across the floor. The storm had passed. The silence felt almost holy after the night's fury. Talon was gone. Only his tracks marked the damp earth near the door. For a moment, fear gripped her chest, until she saw the kettle warming on the coals and a strip of dried venison laid neatly on a wooden plate. He had left her food. Clara moved slowly, still sore from the long walk in the fall. She studied the cabin with clearer eyes. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a life carefully built from solitude. On one wall hung a bow and a quiver of arrows, feathers bound with rawhide. Beside them, a small carved figure, an eagle, wings spread wide, sat atop a flat stone. There was reverence in every placement, in every mark of the blade that had shaped them. She ran her fingers along the wooden table, tracing scars from years of use. Everything in the cabin told a story of hands that worked hard but never wasted motion. The door creaked. She turned quickly. Talon entered carrying a bundle of firewood on his shoulder. His shirt was damp, his dark hair tied back. Morning light caught the curve of his muscles as he dropped the wood beside the hearth. "You're awake," he said quietly. "I thought you'd left me." He looked at her, one brow raised. "If I meant to leave you, you'd be gone before sunrise." There was no arrogance in his tone, just truth, sharp and simple. She offered a faint smile, I suppose I should thank you again, for saving me twice now. He shrugged, kneeling to stoke the fire. The land saves no one. We only borrow its mercy for a time. Clara watched him, fascinated by how he moved, precise, silent, as if every breath belonged to the rhythm of the earth itself. Tell me something, she said. Why live out here alone? He paused, the poker still in his hand. His eyes lifted to hers, and for a long time he said nothing. Because the world of men forgets too easily. He said at last, I do not wish to forget. Forget what? He met her gaze then. The faces, the fire, the day my heart was broken by both. She felt the air between them grow heavier, charged with something deeper than curiosity. Talon rose to his full height. Once, he said, I trusted a woman from the settler towns. I thought her heart saw beyond skin and tribe. I was wrong. Her words brought soldiers. My brother died because of it. Clara's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Sorry does not raise the dead, he said, his voice softer than before. That is why I live apart. I keep to the high canyons, the wild places. I trust only what cannot lie. The land, the wind, the fire. She stepped closer, drawn by a mix of sorrow and respect. Then why did you bring me here? His jaw flexed. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe the fire in your eyes was stronger than my fear. The confession hung in the air, fragile as smoke. Clara's heartbeat thudded in her chest. You said last night you can't control yourself around me. What did you mean? He looked away sharply as though her question had cut too close. You wouldn't understand. Try me. He turned then, his gaze fierce and unguarded. You remind me of everything I swore to bury. The gentleness, the want, the hunger to feel something again. His voice trembled on the last words, not with weakness, but with something that scared even him. You stir ghosts that should stay quiet. Clara took another step toward him. Maybe those ghosts don't want to stay quiet. His breath hitched. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The fire popped, and the air between them seemed to tighten, every spark echoing inside their chests. But then, Talon turned away. You should rest, he said roughly. The trail back to the town is long. I'll take you there when the path dries. I don't want to leave yet, she whispered. He froze, his back to her. You don't belong here, he said, though his voice sounded more like a plea than a command. This land breaks women like you, she smiled faintly. I've been broken before. I survived it, he faced her then, eyes dark as thunderclouds. You don't know what you're saying. Maybe not. But I know what I feel. Her courage startled even her. Something inside her, some buried spark, had awakened in this wild place, and it burned too brightly to be ignored. Talon's jaw clenched. You should fear me, Clara. I don't, she said softly. You could have harmed me 100 times. You didn't. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he said, I am not a man you can tame. She met his gaze, calm and steady. Then it's a good thing I'm not trying to. For a long time, he said nothing. Then slowly, he sat down on the other side of the fire, staring into the flames. You speak with fire in your heart, he murmured. Like a warrior. Maybe the West made me one, she said. That drew a small fleeting smile from him, a rare thing, brief as sunrise over the desert. Outside, the day warmed. Wind whispered through the cracks, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. Clara found herself sitting beside him, both silent, watching the fire burn down to glowing coals. At one point, he reached for a wooden carving, a small eagle, wings open, and placed it between them. This, he said, is the spirit of freedom. My people believe it sees what man cannot. It knows the heart better than the mind does. She looked at it, then at him. And what does it see now? He hesitated, his voice low. It sees a man forgetting his vow. Their eyes locked, and for an instant the world outside the cabin ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of the fire, the thrum of two hearts, and the hush that came before something sacred or dangerous. But then the sound of a distant rifle broke the spell. A single echoing crack rolling through the canyon. Talon stiffened. He rose and crossed to the window slit, peering out. His shoulders went rigid. What is it? Clara whispered. Riders, he said grimly. 2, maybe 3. Bounty hunters, done for you? His eyes hardened. For anyone with Apache blood. They hunt what they don't understand. He reached for his bow, slinging it across his back, movements sharp and practiced. They must not find you here. They'd call you a traitor for standing under my roof. I'm not leaving you, she said, standing as well. You'll do as I say, he snapped, but the fire in her eyes made him falter. You saved me, she said firmly. Now I'm saving you. If they come, we fight together. He looked at her long and hard as if weighing her soul. Finally, he nodded once, slow and solemn. So be it. But if we fight as one. The moment sealed something between them, a bond forged not from words but from will. As he handed her a small revolver, their fingers brushed. The touch sent a current through her that burned hotter than fear. Outside, hooves echoed faintly in the distance, drawing nearer. Inside the cabin, the firelight flickered across their faces, turning shadows into armor. The world beyond those walls was waiting with its cruelty and its judgment. But for now, in the hush of that cabin, two souls stood side by side, caught between danger and desire, past and promise. And though Talon's warning still echoed in her mind, I can't control myself around you, Clara realized it wasn't control she wanted from him. It was truth. And in that truth, for the first time since her husband's death, she felt alive again. The sun fell behind the canyon walls, bleeding red across the stone. Dusk stretched long shadows through the pines, and the air grew sharp with the scent of rain long gone. The riders had not yet come, but their presence haunted the horizon like ghosts on the wind. Talon stood outside the cabin, scanning the ridge. His bow was in hand, his stance still as a hawk waiting for its prey. Clara watched him from the doorway, the firelight behind her framing him in amber. There was something about the way he stood, unmoving yet alive with tension, that made her chest tighten. He was part of the land, carved from it yet somehow separate, carrying its scars and its spirit both. Do you think they're close? She asked softly. He didn't turn. Close enough to smell the smoke of our fire. Then why not put it out? He glanced at her over his shoulder, a faint spark in his eyes. Because I will not hide in my own land. The words rang like steel. She understood them, felt them. He was not merely defiant. He was anchored. Everything in him came from roots buried deep in this wild soil. Still, as he stepped back inside, she saw the shadow of weariness in his face. He had been fighting for too long, against men, against memory, against himself. Eat, she said gently, handing him a plate of beans and dried meat she had warmed over the coals. He accepted it without a word. When he sat by the fire, the light danced on his skin, tracing lines of muscle and old scars. The silence between them was heavy, but not cold. It was the silence of two hearts that had learned the world's noise too well. At last, he said quietly, you should not be here when they come. And where would you have me go? She asked, to the ridge. There's an old cave beyond the cedar trees. You'd be safe there until they pass. She shook her head. I told you before, I'm not leaving you. He looked at her long and steady, the fire catching the gold in his eyes. You're a fool. Maybe, she said, meeting his gaze. But I'd rather die beside a man who's honest than live under one who lies. For a moment, the ghost of a smile crossed his lips. It was the first time she'd seen warmth, in him that wasn't guarded. You speak like a woman who's lost everything, he said. Maybe. That's why I have nothing left to fear. Something in that answer disarmed him. He looked away, staring into the fire as if it might hold the answers he'd buried. Then, in a low voice, he said, when I was young, I thought love was a river, strong enough to carve through stone. I thought it could survive anything. But rivers dry when the sun grows cruel. And yet, she said softly, the land remembers where they ran. Their eyes met again. The words hung there between them, fragile, trembling. Outside, the wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the lonely cry of an owl. The night had turned clear, silver moonlight spilling through the cracks of the roof. Talon rose and walked to the door, looking out across the valley. The moon is watching, he said quietly. Clara followed, standing beside him. The moonlight painted the world in silver and shadow, the cliffs, the creek, the wild grass all glowing faintly. It's beautiful, she whispered. He nodded. It is the same moon my ancestors saw when they prayed for peace. She turned to him. Do you still pray for it? He hesitated. No, I've learned peace isn't something you find. It's something you make, and something the world tries to take from you. She studied his face, the lines carved by time and pain. And what if someone helped you fight for it? He turned then, and their faces were close. So close she could see the flicker of the fire reflected in his eyes. You don't know what you're offering, he murmured. Then tell me. His breath came slow, controlled, but his voice trembled with the truth he'd been holding back. You stir something in me I buried with the dead. I warned you because I can feel it burning under my skin. I can't control it when you're near. Her heart beat fast, but she didn't step back. And if I don't want you to? He stared at her as though he hadn't understood. Then his hand lifted, hesitating before brushing a strand of her hair back from her face. The touch was gentle, reverent even, but his fingers trembled. You don't understand what I've done, he said hoarsely. What I've been. I don't care, she whispered. I see who you are now. His hand lingered at her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. The space between them vanished, slowly, naturally, as if the land itself had drawn them together. The wild scent of cedar filled the air, the sound of the river murmuring far below. For the first time in years, Talon's walls began to crumble. He leaned in, his forehead resting lightly against hers, his voice a whisper against her skin. You shouldn't be here. You'll be the death of me. Maybe, she breathed, but I'd rather die alive than live half asleep. Then, under the pale moonlight spilling through the doorway, his lips found hers. It was not the kiss of a man claiming. It was the kiss of a soul remembering what it meant to feel. Slow, unhurried, filled with a kind of awe neither of them had known in years. The world around them seemed to still, the river's murmur fading, the wind holding its breath. When they finally parted, their foreheads stayed together, hearts pounding in the same wild rhythm. Talon's voice was barely audible. You'll change everything, Clara Monroe. Maybe it's time something changed, she whispered. They stood that way for a long while, the fire behind them painting their shadows against the cabin wall. But peace, like all things in the West, never lasted long. A sound shattered the stillness, the sharp crack of a branch outside followed by the low whinny of a horse. Talon's body tensed instantly. He moved like lightning, grabbing his bow and slinging his quiver across his shoulder. They've found us, he said. Clara's blood ran cold. What do we do? He looked at her, his face no longer soft but hard with purpose. We move before the moon drops. The canyon will hide us until dawn. He handed her a small pouch. Take this. Water, jerky, and a knife. Don't lose it. Talon, he stopped her with a look, fierce and tender all at once. Whatever happens, don't look back. Do you understand? She nodded, though fear gripped her throat. Then, before she could say another word, he took her hand and pulled her into the night. The air was cold and sharp, the canyon whispering like an ancient beast around them. The moon guided their way as they ran through the brush, the sound of hooves echoing faintly behind. And as they vanished into the wild dark, Clara realized that what had begun as shelter from a storm had become something far greater, something wild, sacred and unstoppable. Whatever lay ahead, she would not turn back. Because inside that cabin, under fire and moonlight, something in her had awakened and it would never sleep again. The night air bit at Clara's skin as they ran, hearts pounding in unison with the thunder of hooves echoing somewhere behind them. The moon hung high, a pale lantern guiding their way through the jagged canyon paths. Every shadow looked like an ambush waiting to spring. Every gust of wind carried the ghost of pursuit. Talon led her through the maze of stone and cedar, his movements sure and silent despite the darkness. He was a shadow against the earth, swift, grounded, unyielding. Clara followed, clutching the pouch he'd given her, her boots striking rock and sand with desperate rhythm. They reached a narrow ridge where the land fell away into a deep ravine, the faint shimmer of water glinting below. Talon stopped and crouched, scanning the horizon. His keen eyes caught the faint glimmer of campfires in the distance, 3, maybe 4. They've split up, he muttered. One group's cutting us off from the west. Then we keep east, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. He turned to her, his face ghosted in silver light. East leads through the gorge. It's steep, dangerous. So is standing still, she said firmly. He studied her a moment, and a flicker of something, admiration, maybe pride, passed through his eyes. You ride with a warrior's heart, Clara Monroe. They descended the ridge, sliding down loose shale. The canyon opened before them, a vast riverbed lined with bones of old trees and stones smoothed from centuries of rain. The moonlight turned the sand silver, the cliffs rising like cathedral walls on either side. For a while, there was silence, just their footsteps and the whisper of the wind. Then came the sound they both feared, the echo of hooves behind them. Louder now. Talon cursed under his breath. "They've found our trail." Before Clara could speak, he whistled low and sharp. From the shadows beyond the rocks came a horse, his black stallion spirit emerging like a ghost from the dark. Talon had left him hidden when he'd gone to gather wood earlier that morning. "Up," he said, lifting Clara into the saddle before swinging up behind her. His arm brushed against hers, strong and steady. "Hold tight." She did. The stallion surged forward, hooves pounding across the sand. The wind tore through Clara's hair as they flew beneath the stars, the world rushing past in a blur of silver and black. She could feel the strength of him behind her, the warmth of his chest against her back, the solid weight of his arm as he guided the reins. Behind them, gunfire cracked through the canyon. Bullets sparked off the rocks, ringing like bells of war. Talon spurred the horse faster, weaving between narrow stone walls and dry riverbeds. The stallion leapt over fallen logs, his breath steaming in the cold air. Clara clung to Talon's arm, her heart hammering like a drum. Then sudden pain. A sharp cry from Spirit. The horse stumbled, his front leg buckling. Talon hauled on the reins, pulling the animal to a sliding stop. "He's hit," Talon said through gritted teeth, dropping to the ground. Clara jumped down after him. Blood darkened the stallion's flank, though the wound was shallow. "They'll be on us in minutes," she said, her voice shaking. He looked toward the cliff wall, then pointed to a narrow crevice half hidden by brush. "There. That'll lead us to the old caves." He helped her climb, the narrow path scraping their hands raw. Behind them, torches flared in the distance. 3 riders moving fast. At last they reached the cave, a hollow carved by time, hidden behind a curtain of stone. They slipped inside, panting, hearts wild. The cave was vast and cold, filled with the smell of earth and water. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, its surface etched with weathered carvings of eagles and wolves. The flicker of their lantern threw dancing shadows across the walls, where handprints, centuries old, glowed faintly in the light. Clara turned slowly. "What is this place?" Talon's voice was low, reverent. "A place of my people, sacred. My mother brought me here when I was a boy. She said it was where lost spirits come to remember who they were." He walked to the altar and placed his hand upon it. "I never thought I'd return." Outside, the sound of the riders grew closer, echoes bouncing through the canyon like drumbeats. Clara drew the small revolver from her belt. Her hands trembled, but her jaw was set. "You said we fight as one." "I meant it." Talon looked at her, the fire of the torch flickering in his eyes. "You shouldn't have to fight my battles." "There are battles now," she said simply. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the reflection of her own fear in his gaze. "You'll be the death of me, woman. Then you'll die knowing someone stood beside you." A muscle worked in his jaw. Then he nodded once. "So be it." They took positions at the cave entrance. The first rider appeared, a man in a dust-stained coat, rifle raised. Talon loosed an arrow, swift and silent, striking him clean through the shoulder. The man fell with a cry, his torch tumbling into the sand. The others charged forward, shouting. Gunfire roared, echoing off the stone. Clara fired once, twice, the recoil shocking her arms. She saw one rider drop, his horse bolting into the night. The third man fired wildly, bullets sparking against the cave's edge. Talon lunged forward, pulling Clara down just as a shot grazed her sleeve. He rose in one fluid motion, drew his knife, and threw. The blade struck true, silencing the canyon. Then there was only the crackle of the dying torches and the sound of their breathing. Clara stared at him, chest heaving. "Is it over?" "For now," he said. His voice was calm, but there was blood on his arm where a bullet had grazed him. "You're hurt," she said, rushing to him. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," she snapped, tearing a strip from her skirt and pressing it against the wound. Her hands trembled, but she worked quickly, wrapping the cloth tight. He watched her, silent, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. When she finished, he reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek. "You're fire and storm," he said quietly, "and you don't even know it." She smiled faintly through her tears. "Then maybe that's why the storm brought me to you." He didn't answer. He simply looked at her, a long, wordless look that said everything words could not. Outside, dawn began to break over the canyon. The sky glowed with the first light of morning. pink and gold spilling over the ridges. The wind carried the scent of sage and smoke, the promise of a new day. Talon turned toward the cave's mouth. "They'll come again," he said. "Others always do. Then we'll face them," Clara said. "Together." He smiled, just a ghost of one, but real. "You're not afraid of much, are you?" "Not anymore." He looked out toward the rising sun. "Inside that cabin," he said softly, "you changed the spirit in me." And for the first time, she saw it, the warrior's guard melting away, the pain giving way to peace. As the light grew, they stepped from the cave together, side by side. Below them, the canyon stretched wide and endless, a land untamed and alive. For Clara, it was no longer a place of danger. It was home, because he was there. And though the world still hunted them for that single morning, they stood free beneath the western sky, two souls who had found something wilder and stronger than fear. Love, born of fire and moonlight, carried them forward into the dawn. The sun rose slowly over the vast Arizona plains, painting the world in gold. The air smelled of rain and dust, the promise of another hard day in the land that gave nothing easily. But for Clara Monroe and Talon, it wasn't hardship they felt that morning. It was the quiet ache of freedom, and something deeper blooming between them. They had left the sacred cave at dawn, their path leading through the open canyon. The land stretched endless before them, red rock, sagebrush, and far-off ridges that shimmered in the rising heat. Spirit limped but carried on, loyal even through pain. Talon walked beside the horse, his bow slung across his back, his hair falling loose over his shoulders. His arm still bled faintly where the bullet had grazed him, but he made no complaint. Clara watched him as they traveled, her heart heavy with words she hadn't yet found the courage to speak. He had saved her life more times than she could count. He had fought for her, bled for her, and somewhere in the madness of pursuit and fear, she had come to love him, not with the soft fondness of civilized hearts, but with the fierce devotion born of fire and survival. When they reached the ridge above the plains, Talon stopped. Below in the distance, smoke rose from the valley. Clara's eyes widened. "That's the town," he nodded grimly. "The soldiers have come. Because of me?" He turned to her, his eyes deep as the desert sky. "No, Clara, because of me." She looked down the valley, columns of riders, dust clouds rising with every gallop. The U.S. Cavalry. She felt the blood drain from her face. "Talon," she whispered, "we can't fight them all." "I don't intend to." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small carved token, an eagle with its wings spread wide. He pressed it into her hand. "My mother made this," he said softly. "She told me it would guide me when the path ahead turned dark. Now it will guide you." She looked at the carving, tears stinging her eyes. "What are you saying?" He smiled faintly. "You have to go, Clara. Take Spirit and ride north. There's a trading post 2 days from here. You'll find safety there." Her voice broke. "And you?" "I'll stay," he said simply. "I'll lead them away from you. They're not after the woman who fell into the canyon. They're after the Apache who defied them." "No," she said, shaking her head fiercely. "I won't let you. You think I can just ride away while they kill you?" His gaze softened, and for a moment he reached out, brushing his fingers across her cheek. "You gave me something I never thought I'd have again." "What?" "Peace." She caught his hand, holding it tight. "You can't ask me to leave you, Talon. You can't." He looked out toward the horizon where the riders advanced like a storm. "Clara, if they catch you with me, they'll call you a traitor. They'll hang you alongside me. I won't let that happen." Tears filled her eyes, spilling over. "You once told me you couldn't control yourself around me," she whispered. "Now I can't control myself without you." A sad smile tugged at his lips. "Then remember me when the wind touches your face." "I'll be there." He leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers. The warmth of him, the scent of cedar and smoke filled her senses. For one long, fragile moment, time stopped. Then he pulled away, his eyes steady. "Ride north. Don't look back." She hesitated only a heartbeat before swinging into the saddle. Spirit snorted, restless. Talon slapped the horse's flank. "Go!" The stallion bolted forward, his hooves kicking up dust. Clara turned once, just once, to see him standing there on the ridge. Bow in hand, wind in his hair, a lone figure against the endless sky. The soldiers reached the canyon moments later. Gunfire cracked through the air, echoing like thunder. Clara's scream was lost to the wind as she rode, the sound of battle fading behind her. Hours passed before she stopped. The land was silent again, the sun sinking low. She slid from the saddle and fell to her knees, clutching the small carved eagle to her chest. "Please," she whispered to the sky, "let him live." Days turned into weeks. Clara reached the trading post as Talon had told her. She worked among travelers and traders, always listening for news, of raids, of battles, of an Apache warrior who vanished into legend. Some said he'd been captured and killed. Others said he rode into the mountains, wounded but alive, vanishing into the wilderness like smoke. Clara never believed the first story. Every night she lit a lantern and placed it on her windowsill, facing south toward the canyon. A beacon, a promise. One night, weeks later, the wind changed. It carried with it the scent of sage and something familiar, something wild. When she stepped outside, a shadow stood near the edge of the firelight. "Talon," she whispered. He was thinner. His arm bound in cloth, but his eyes, those dark, steady eyes, still burned with life. "You kept the light," he said. She ran to him, tears breaking loose as he caught her in his arms. "I thought I lost you," she sobbed. "You can't lose what was never gone," he murmured against her hair. "I followed the wind. It led me back to you." For a long time they stood beneath the open sky, the world falling silent around them. The past, the pain, the blood, they all drifted away with the desert wind. When morning came, the first rays of sunlight touched their faces. Clara looked out toward the horizon where the land stretched forever. "What now?" she asked softly. Talon smiled, brushing his thumb across her lips. "Now we live." And under the endless western sky, where love and freedom were the same word, they rode together once more.